The room is quiet. Morning light falls across a mattress that hasn't been moved in longer than anyone in the house can remember. Someone is finally clearing this room out. Decades of accumulated furniture, decades of a life that once filled it. The mattress is lifted. Something is underneath. A small notebook. Dusty. Flattened almost flat by years of weight pressing down on it. The cover has faded to a color that might once have been anything. The pages, when it's opened, give off that particular smell that old paper carries. Not unpleasant, just old. The handwriting inside belongs to someone who may have been gone for decades. A date appears at the top of a page, then another, a few pages later. The entries are ordinary. A shopping trip, a complaint about the weather, a name mentioned in passing. And that ordinariness is exactly what makes this unsettling. Because at some point, the diary simply stops. But the family didn't. Life continued. Children grew older. The house changed hands, changed wallpaper, changed furniture. People married. People died. The world outside transformed almost beyond recognition. And beneath that mattress, through all of it, the diary remained. So here's the question this film is going to sit with. What happens when an object outlives the life that created it? And the quieter question underneath it, how much of a family's history can still be found in something nobody ever thought was important enough to keep? Chapter 1. The Notebook. Before we can understand what this object might tell us, we have to look closely at what it actually is. A diary like this one is, materially, a fairly modest object. A bound or stitched notebook, likely inexpensive by the standards of its time, with a cover, cloth, cardboard, or simple leather-look material depending on the era and price point, that has faded and softened with age. The paper inside has yellowed, a natural and well-understood process caused by the breakdown of lignin in wood-pulp paper, common in mass-produced notebooks and diaries from the early 20th century onward. Ink, depending on the writing instrument used, may have faded to brown or softened in contrast against the page. There may be stains, torn corners, pages that stick slightly together, or a spine that has cracked and loosened from repeated opening and closing. Historians and archivists who work with personal documents like this one pay close attention to exactly these physical details, because material evidence can tell us things the written words alone cannot. The pattern of wear on a notebook can suggest how frequently and how carefully it was handled. A page opened often will show different wear than one rarely touched. A pressed flower, a ticket stub, a folded receipt tucked between pages can reveal what the writer considered worth saving, even without a single word of explanation. The object has its own history, distinct from, but deeply intertwined with, whatever is written inside it. Chapter 2. Why People Wrote Things Down. Diary keeping in America took many different forms across the 20th century, and it's worth being clear from the outset. Not everyone kept one, and those who did rarely did so for the same reasons. Some people wrote to remember, a simple desire to hold on to details that daily life would otherwise erase. Some needed a private space to think through a day, a decision, or a feeling they couldn't easily say aloud to anyone else. Some used a diary as a practical tool, a record of weather for farm work, household expenses, appointments, or family milestones, more chronicle than confession. Some simply enjoyed the act of writing itself, without any deeper motive behind it. The growing availability of inexpensive, mass-produced notebooks, diaries, and stationery across the 19th and 20th centuries made this kind of personal writing increasingly accessible well beyond the wealthy or highly educated. 5-and-dime stores, mail-order catalogs, and later drugstores and stationery shops all sold affordable blank books and dated diaries, putting the practice within reach of a wide range of households. Here is the detail that matters most for this documentary. The person writing in a diary like this one almost certainly wasn't trying to create a historical document. They weren't writing for a future stranger or even necessarily for their own grandchildren. They were simply living, recording a day, in the moment, with no expectation that anyone else would ever read it. That's precisely what makes its eventual discovery, decades later, so quietly powerful. How much family history disappears when ordinary objects like this one are thrown away before anyone understands what they contain. Chapter 3. The Life Between the Lines. Consider a single, plausible line from a diary like this one. Went downtown today. 4 words. Almost nothing on its own. But behind those 4 words sits an entire, unrecorded world. What did the street actually look like that day? How did she get there? On foot, by streetcar, by a family car, if the household had one yet. What did the shop windows hold? What did she buy, and what did it cost her? Who was waiting for her when she came home? What was happening elsewhere in the family that same afternoon? A worry she didn't write down, a conversation she chose not to record. The diary itself tells us almost none of this directly, but the broader historical record, newspapers, city directories, period photographs, catalogs, household account books from similar households, can help reconstruct the world surrounding those 4 words, even when the diary itself stays silent about it. This is the idea this documentary keeps returning to. The diary records moments. The object itself witnessed decades. The gap between those 2 things, between what was written and everything that happened around the writing, is where most of this story actually lives. Chapter 4. The House Around It. Picture the diary, beneath the mattress, while an entire household changes around it, year after year. A child somewhere in the house learns to walk, then learns to read, then eventually leaves for school and doesn't come back to live there again. A radio arrives at some point, and later a telephone. Furniture is replaced, piece by piece, as it wears out or falls out of fashion. Wallpaper is stripped and redone more than once. Someone in the family marries, a new baby arrives, and a crib appears somewhere else in the house. Someone moves away, for work, for marriage, for reasons nobody bothered to write down. Eventually, even the mattress itself may be replaced, though whichever mattress replaces it, the diary, undiscovered, simply moves back underneath the new one, and the pattern continues. Through every one of these changes, the diary itself never moves. It stays exactly where it was placed, while the room, the house, and the family around it are transformed almost entirely. This chapter is really about the house as its own kind of character, the one constant physical space holding a family together across decades of change, with the diary as its quietest, most stationary occupant. Chapter 5. The Things the Diary Never Recorded. This is one of the emotional centers of the film, and it deserves to be handled carefully. A diary like this one can tell us what one person, on a given day, considered worth writing down, but it cannot tell us everything, and the gap between what was recorded and what actually happened is enormous by definition. There are conversations that were never written down at all, arguments that came and went without a single line devoted to them, small kindnesses too ordinary to seem worth noting, embarrassing moments nobody wanted preserved, even privately, children's jokes, told once and then forgotten by everyone except, briefly, the people in the room, quiet meals that meant something to someone but generated no entry, financial worries carried silently, grief that was felt deeply but never put into words on paper, countless ordinary afternoons that simply passed, unremarked, the way most afternoons do. This creates the central contrast this documentary is built around. The diary preserved one person's selective version of a life. The object survived everything else, everything that was never written down at all. Chapter 6. A Family Changes. Time moves forward, and the diary's own use inevitably changes along with it. The person writing in it grows older. The household around them shifts and reorganizes. Gradually, the diary is opened less often. Eventually, at some point that the diary itself doesn't explain, the writing simply stops. There are many plausible, ordinary reasons this might happen. The writer may have simply grown out of the habit. Life may have become too full or too demanding to leave time for it. Circumstances may have changed in ways that made daily writing feel less necessary or less possible. This documentary won't invent a specific reason where the historical record, in this case the diary and the surrounding family history, doesn't actually supply one. Speculating a dramatic cause where none is evidenced would misrepresent what an object like this can actually tell us. What matters far more than why the writing stopped is what happened afterward. The diary didn't disappear along with the habit that created it. It simply continued existing, closed, silent, tucked beneath a mattress that continued to be slept on for years to come. Chapter 7. 50 Years of Silence. This is where the film's title becomes fully meaningful, and where the pace of the documentary should slow down considerably. For decades, nobody opens this diary. It sits beneath the mattress, gathering dust that nobody sees because nobody has any reason to look. The room around it changes hands, changes purpose, changes decoration. The family living in the house changes as well. Children become parents, parents become grandparents. Some family members leave the household permanently, whether through moving away or through death. Outside the walls of that one bedroom, the broader world transforms almost beyond recognition. Cars change shape and technology. Clothing styles shift, then shift again. Television arrives in American homes and gradually becomes a fixture of daily life. Neighborhoods are built up, decline, or are rebuilt entirely. Technology that would have seemed like fantasy to the diary's writer becomes commonplace. And beneath the mattress, through every bit of that transformation, the diary simply waits, doing nothing, changing in no way except the slow physical aging common to any piece of old paper left undisturbed. Silence itself becomes a storytelling device here. In many ways, the diary's most remarkable story isn't found in the pages that were written. It's found in the decades during which absolutely nothing was written in it at all. The long stretch of time it simply endured, unread and unnoticed, while everything around it moved on without it. What if the most valuable part of the diary isn't what was written inside it, but everything that happened after the final entry? Chapter 8. When the diary is found. Return now to the discovery that opened this film. Someone lifts the mattress, likely for a completely unrelated reason, cleaning, moving, clearing out a room after a death in the family. The notebook is found, unexpected, half-flattened, coated in years of dust. The pages are opened, and the handwriting inside, a specific person's actual handwriting, not a typed or printed record, has a way of making the past suddenly, unexpectedly personal in a way that a photograph or an official document sometimes doesn't. A name appears, a date, perhaps a familiar surname, one still carried by someone standing in that same room today. Perhaps someone present recognizes the handwriting immediately. A signature style, a particular way of forming certain letters, something instantly and unmistakably familiar. Perhaps a grandchild realizes, reading a few lines, that the ordinary young woman or man described on these pages is the same person they've only ever known as an elderly relative, or as someone who died before they were old enough to really know them at all. This discovery doesn't need a dramatic reveal to matter. This documentary deliberately avoids inventing a shocking secret, a hidden scandal, or a forbidden romance simply for effect, because the diary's actual power comes from something much quieter and, ultimately, more universal. Someone ordinary once lived an entire, complete life, in as much detail and complexity as anyone living today. And here, unexpectedly, is a small, genuine fragment of it. Chapter 9. What the object remembered. It's worth pausing here to reinterpret exactly what this diary actually remembers, in the sense this documentary series is built around. The notebook doesn't remember anything in a literal sense. It has no awareness, no memory, no consciousness of any kind. But it was physically present through everything this film has described. The mattress pressed down against it for decades. The house stood around it, while generations slept in the room above it, unaware it was even there. The floor beneath that room was walked across countless thousands of times by people living out their own ordinary days. The seasons changed outside the window, year after year. The surrounding neighborhood transformed, and the diary, through all of it, simply remained exactly where it had been left. This is where the objects that saw everything premise becomes fully clear. The diary didn't literally witness any of this, but it was there, continuously, physically present through decades, that otherwise left almost no other direct trace. And that physical continuity is rarer than it sounds. Most of what makes up an ordinary life disappears almost immediately. The conversations, the moods, the small daily decisions, the texture of a particular afternoon, in a particular room, in a particular year. These things leave no trace at all. They happen, and then they are gone. And within a generation or two, even the people who might have remembered them are gone as well. What survives is almost always the exceptional, the formal photograph, the official document, the object preserved specifically because someone understood it to be valuable. The ordinary is almost never preserved because ordinaries almost never looks in the moment like something worth keeping, which is precisely why an object that survived by accident, not because anyone protected it, not because anyone understood its value, but simply because it slipped between the mattress and the wall, and the house stood long enough, carries a different kind of weight than a carefully curated archive. It wasn't saved, it simply wasn't lost. And in the long, continuous erasure of ordinary life, that time performs on everything, not being lost, turns out to be its own extraordinary achievement. Sometimes, simply having been there, uninterrupted, across that much time, is what makes an ordinary object genuinely precious to anyone trying to understand a family's history. Chapter 10. The Value of Ordinary History. History, as it's usually told, tends to preserve presidents, wars, inventions, famous speeches, and major disasters, the large, dramatic, well-documented events that shape textbooks and museum exhibits. But most human life was never made of those things. It was made of breakfast, of work, of shopping trips and small errands, of arguments that mattered intensely in the moment and were forgotten within days, of birthdays, bills, weather, children, waiting rooms, small celebrations, and ordinary disappointments that never made it into any official record anywhere. A diary like this one, however incomplete and however selective, can preserve genuine fragments of exactly that kind of ordinary world, the kind that otherwise vanishes almost entirely once the people who lived it are gone. And once the writer themselves is gone, those fragments stop being simply a private notebook and become something closer to evidence, proof that a specific, individual life, full of its own ordinary texture, actually happened, in detail, the way every life does. The handwriting simply stops. No explanation, no dramatic ending, just the last few ordinary lines, and then blank page after blank page waiting for entries that were never written. Objects don't need to seem important at the time, because time has a way of making that decision for them, long after the person who left them behind is no longer there to explain why they mattered. For half a century, nobody thought this diary was worth opening. But while everyone else moved forward, grew older, moved away, and eventually disappeared, it stayed exactly where it had been left, holding a small piece of the past quietly in place. Some objects don't tell us what happened. They simply survive long enough to remind us that it did. If somewhere in your own family there's an old notebook, a box of letters, or something similar that nobody's opened in years, this might be a good moment to go take a look, before it becomes another object nobody remembers the story behind. If you found something like this yourself, tell us about it in the comments. And if you want more stories about the ordinary objects that quietly outlasted the lives around them, subscribe. There are more of them out there, waiting in rooms just like this one.